The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here's Brandon.
Welcome to the Brandon Peters Show as we continue our track through
The summer of 82 at 40.
a weekend by weekend look at movies released during the summer of 1982. And as always with me for this journey from Forbes, Scott Mendelson.
Wait a minute. I'm going to be on every single one of these?
Oh, yeah. All of them.
Oh.
Yep. It's in the contract.
I'm getting paid?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good news, bad news.
Yep.
Hi, how you doing?
Paid in IOUs. Yes. All right. Doing good. So we're here. We've done 1 week, and arguably this was better of a week. There's at least something that feels summery here to start our week, our second weekend of May, as we are looking at a time in the life of a pop culture nerd going through 1982, as we did not, because we were too little.
I was 2 years old.
I was 0. I was months. I was 5 months old, going on 5 months old. So this week we're going to take a look at 4 films, 2 schlocky horror films, a star-driven satire, and a big tentpole movie. Maybe was a surprise big hit. We'll talk about that later on. The news, what was going on in the world this week?
It's the news of the moment.
Scott, let's take a look here. During this week where these movies open, FC Barcelona of Spain wins the 22nd European Winners' Cup over Standard Liège of Belgium, 2-1. John,
I won $100 on that bet.
You did. That's why he's here today. John Updike wins the Pulitzer Prize for Rabbit is Rich. The Chicago Cubs win their 8,000th game. That game was won against the Houston Astros. That is for regular of the show. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting your damn Prez Maxon. He's a big Cubs fan. And Terry Utley of Arkansas was crowned Miss USA. We'll touch on that a little later on the show, actually. Barnum closed in New York City after 854 performances. Salvador Jorge Blanco won the presidential election in the Dominican Republic. And to follow up from something last week, because Scott was loving the hockey news, the New York Islanders won the Stanley Cup, sweeping Vancouver Canucks in 4 games, their 3rd Stanley Cup in a row. I believe that's called a three-peat. That's what happened in the world this week for the show. This is the weekend. This is what, the 14th, 15th, and 16th of May. The first movie I'm going to bring up to talk about for this one is an odd little horror film called The House Where Evil Dwells.
They were strangers from the West, learning to live in harmony with their new home. Everything seemed perfect until they learned the truth about the house where evil dwells.
What are you doing? Are you crazy? No! Stop it!
They were told the stories were only legends, tales told from generation to generation. It happened 100 years ago, and now it's about to happen again.
No!
house where evil dwells.
It's directed by Kevin Connor, he of Motel Hell fame, but he's directed episodes of Space 1999, which is covered on this show, has been covered. It'll be over by the time this is airing. At Earth's Core, From Beyond the Grave, loads of TV, and it stars Susan George, Edward Albert, Doug McClure, and Amy Barrett. It's about a young American family who moves to a house in Kyoto, Japan. It turns out to be haunted by the ghosts of a woman and her lover who were killed by the woman's husband, as well as the ghost of the husband who killed himself afterwards. What a movie this was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my turn. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had never heard of this one before.
Mhm.
Perhaps understandably. And again, to go back to something I said last week that I'll be saying a lot over the next several weeks. It looks so colorful compared to what we're used to now.
Yeah.
This is a relatively low budget or at least low expectation picture,
Mhm.
but it still looks very vivid and poignant and just very colorful in a way that just plays very well on an old and new television.
Right.
The film opens with a relatively ambitious period piece prologue involving a murder-suicide. And then for the most of the story, it's a pretty conventional haunted house picture. You have a nuclear family that moves into a house, is unaware of the diabolical history, and then strange things start going bump in the night.
Mhm.
There is an indirect infidelity subplot involving the wife having an affair with a friend of the husband, which again sort of mirrors the deep dark origin story of the house itself. And it kind of picks up speed in a way in the last 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
I mean, are we allowed to spoil the house?
Yeah. Spoil. I don't
There's
think
actually
anyone's
some
picking up.
solid, relatively speaking, there's some solid and creepy creature effects
Mhm.
where the ghosts sort of take the form of a spider beetle,
Yeah.
something of that nature.
Yeah.
Which, it's old school creature effects, but I'd piss my pants in terror if I woke up to that.
Right.
So and then it ends rather shockingly with the ghosts winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we learned throughout the picture, the ghosts were trying to possess the couple, and what turns out to be the friend, to sort of reenact the manners in which they died, so that their souls can go off to hell, I guess. I mean, is that
the ether,
did they really
the
think that
nether
through?
realm? Yeah. That's true.
Like, oh shit, we didn't think about this. We're not actually going to heaven.
I
We
want to
did
keep
murder and
haunting.
stuff. And the three main characters die violently.
Yeah.
The husband kills his friend and kills his wife and then kills himself, and then roll credits.
Yeah. Did you think the affair was that like actually happening, or was it happening because the ghosts were making it happen?
I think it's implied that it was happening because of the ghosts.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two good-looking people. Maybe they had thought about it regardless, but
It's Susan George. She gets naked in movies.
yeah.
Like every.
And I don't have a ton to say about this one, other than I was surprised the extent in which it wrote checks that was actually able to cash, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's a movie. It's not great, but it's got things in it that are worth seeing, are memorable. That doesn't make you feel like you wasted a whole lot of time watching the movie. There's some erotic things in it that are there to be there, but there's some good gore. There's some decapitation, some limbs getting trimmed off, some blood splatters. And the fact that the film actually goes there with its finale, that you think maybe they're going to change it around somehow. They don't. The ghosts are a little goofy when they're all hanging out in like alleys and stuff. That doesn't quite work for me, but the opening, you kind of make sure you get the right movie because it's very period centric. It actually legit kind of works in a exploitation, like samurai exploitation kind of way. And the movie's got ho-hum dramas till like the main crux of the possessions and things start taking off. And the husband starting to get really kind of disturbing things happening to him. And And then, yeah, like you said, in the last 20 minutes, it really kicks off and becomes worthwhile.
And that middle 45 minutes between the prologue and the final reel or so, it's tough just because, like a lot of haunted house movies like that, the hauntings can't be that extreme. Otherwise, the people are going to go, yeah, we're getting out of here.
Yeah, right.
And
we got to introduce why they're here.
Yeah.
Their first look through the house, something little happening outside the house. The conversations are like things aren't going so well. Yeah.
But it's if you can make it through the middle 45 minutes, it ends well. Yeah, you're right. The prologue, my first thought was, all things considered.
Could you say that again? You froze for a moment,
sorry.
and I missed. You said
no. You were right about the prologue. My first thought was, did they blow the entire budget on this scene?
Mm-hmm.
It does look relatively, big scaled and relatively impressive in that sense. But partially because it takes place mostly in a single location, it is able to maintain that level of production value throughout its entire 88-minute running time.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's definitely unique in a way, and you almost it's a horror movie for sure. But like who came up with this? Like, what was the sell? But I mean, this is definitely the counter programming for Conan. Probably get a cheap little horror movie out this week. But yeah, I don't know if I'm highly recommending it, but it was certainly more entertaining than some of them last week that we had. So it's a step up.
Hello, I'm Chuck Eisen, producer of the motion picture Death Screams. Ever since this film has been finished, people have been dying all over the country. I'm sorry. What happens in Death Screams could be happening in your hometown tonight. Dear God, I hope not.
Rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
But that we also in the horror had another one out. I think this was a more limited movie, is Death Screams. It's directed by David Nelson, who's I guess more known as an actor, though he did direct 8 episodes of Ozzie and Harriet and an Adam 12 episode along with this film in his career. And it stars Jennifer Chase, Susan Kiger, and Andrea Savio. And it's in a small town, North Carolina. A group of friends are stalked by a mysterious machete-wielding maniac.
Which
Slasher.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
But this is not a good picture.
Yeah.
It is very low budget, understandably.
Mm-hmm.
But it's frankly very boring.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of violence. It does play a little bit in the realm of the first Friday the 13th, in that it saves most of its gore and incident to the last 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's another situation where the final girl or whatever discovers a bunch of bodies right at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But prior to that, not much happens.
Well, and when stuff does happen, there's not really good gore. There's not really good effects. It's off camera. There's a lot of darkness, and it seems like, well, there's a guy killing. Well, you still have to write a movie around the guy killing, and I'm an easy sell on slashers, and this was one I hadn't seen before, and I was just like checked out. Like, there's just people hanging out at a fair for a long time. There's this sheriff that's pissed off about stuff. But and these aren't even well written. It feels like, well, guys just talk like kids, and we'll film it, and it pads out till we get to the chase and kill at the end. Like, there's not even a random kill in the middle, kind of thing. That's got a good set piece, and I still don't understand the trajectory of this film. The killer popped out. Who cares? This was dull. Like, really dull. Like, I've seen cheaper slashers than this that were more entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything to say about it.
Yeah, there's not much to say.
There's no there.
No. Like, there will be no deep dive of this movie later on the Brandon Peters show for sure. It's just, I don't know. Arrow Video put out a Boffo special edition of this. I don't have it. I'm probably never gonna have it, but Whew, that was a choice to pick, but I must have fans. But then again, there's completionists that's like, I must own every 80s slasher movie there is. But yeah, this was just dull. Like I really don't have much more to say than we have on it.
Yeah, I had my wife watch this one with me, and she was mad. I figured it was an 80s slasher film. We honestly, we spent the first, the summer 2020 when we were all stuck in the house. We kind of caught up on a lot of the 80s and late 70s, early 80s slasher films that we had sort of missed, the less franchisey ones. So I figured this would be just checking another one off the box, which it is.
Yeah.
But they can't all be Pieces.
Sorry, Wendy.
Yeah, she'll forgive you.
Pieces is great. Bastard!
Yeah.
So that's a recommendation here. But yeah, Death Screams, just move along.
Escape to the adventure of Marco Polo. He battled across fiery deserts and scaled icy mountain peaks. He was taken prisoner by fierce Muslim warriors.
By our law and the rules of war, you deserve to die.
He challenged Mongol tribesmen, fought with the conquering armies of the great Kublai Khan, and incurred the wrath of the mighty emperor himself.
Your heads will roll in the dust.
After Shogun, there could only be Marco Polo, Sunday at 8, 7 Central and Mountain.
And we'll move along to see what was going on television this week at the Nielsen ratings for that week ending. We mentioned earlier that Miss USA was crowned. That was the #1 show aired on CBS, the Miss USA beauty pageant. Coming in #2, Too Close for Comfort on ABC. Marco Polo Part 1 on NBC was #3. Three's Company staying in the top 10 at #4 on ABC. Last people got into it because last week #10 was Inside the Third Reich Part 1. People were talking about it because it bumped up to #5 this week, Part 2 on ABC. So that, if your breakout sequel, Scott, is Inside the Third Reich Part 2.
I'm scared to wonder if the reason more people watch is they were promised more, how do I put this gently, concentration camp content.
Well, at the end of the first one, they hinted to Hitler, and this one happened. #6, Magnum Pi on CBS. #7, 60 Minutes on CBS, which 60 Minutes was a top 10 placer for a long time. That's for a news show. I don't think a news program would hit nowadays at all. I mean, there's cable news stuff which dominates the cable ratings, but 60 Minutes is a very popular program for the 80s and 90s. And was it on in the 70s? When did 60 Minutes begin? I'm not a 60 Minutes historian. Do you remember it all, Scott?
I want to say the 1970s, but let me look that up. Let me see. 60 Minutes. First episode ever. 1968.
1968. So yeah, that was a staple.
If I may, perhaps to make up for my inappropriate commentary earlier, the Third Reich thing, which is what, 1982. For what it's worth, it had only been a year since the U.S. courts had officially, without question, declared that the Holocaust was an absolute legal fact.
Yeah,
and not something that could be contested. This was in October of '81 when they handed down the big decision saying that it was a Holocaust survivor that had sued various people trying to argue the Holocaust was did not happen, and the end result of the case was that what was his name, Mel Mermelstein, who did sue, and as a result of the case, the American court system determined once and for all that, yes, the Holocaust was a fact. So it's quite possible that people watching this Third Reich documentary in 1982, I mean, obviously it's not like you didn't know what had happened, et cetera, et cetera. It was taught in schools. But I am curious now to wonder how this played out in a world where we have finally recently decided that, nope, this isn't subjective history anymore.
Right. Yeah.
They did a TV movie about him with Leonard Nimoy called Never Again.
Oh, really?
That's the only reason I remembered that story that I just Googled.
Huh. Gotcha.
Anyway, moving on.
Number 8, Heart to Heart on ABC. That's again in the top 10. Number 9, Jeffersons on CBS, and rounding out the top 10 also on CBS, Trapper John MD. And I'm thinking, we're in May. This is like sweeps. The finales of everything are coming out in May. We'll get some weird top 10s probably as we hit June, July, and August with whatever is airing in the summer during the no time during that. But yeah, that's what TV looked like then. Got a couple of specials in there and some comedies and stuff, and Magnum Pi jumping up in there. So I imagine Magnum Pi, since it wasn't on the previous week, I bet it was off, and now it's hitting its like last 3 episodes of the season, like bam, 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 to hit in there something, because I figured that would have been in there last week if it was. But since speaking of like 60 minutes of news, our next film is wrong is right.
2, 1, switch.
In a moment, World War III. But first, a word from our sponsors. Meet TV superstar reporter Patrick Hale. He's on to the most incredible story of his career.
2 atom bombs.
Hit the dirt!
The bad news is, it involves an Arab terrorist.
Why trust me? Television, you reach millions.
A trigger-happy general.
Attack now, Mr. President. Hit him first.
Good guys never shoot first.
Why not?
The President of the United States.
He's heard a rumor about the bomb.
Well, don't say yes and don't say no. Don't say maybe. Say you'll call back, but don't. That's how you stay president.
And it may result in World War III. The good news is, his ratings are going through the roof.
We'll have a show on television.
Columbia Pictures presents Wrong is Right. A very funny look at the world. Rated R.
Starts Friday, Men's Plaza, Westwood.
Directed by Richard Brooks, he of In Cold Blood, and also wrote the films Key Largo, Brute Force, The Killers, Crossfire, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Stars Sean Connery, Robert Conrad, Catherine Ross, John Saxon, Leslie Nielsen, Henry Silva, Rosalind Cash, Dean Stockwell, and there's a little small role for Jennifer Jason Leigh in the movie. Features TV.
I recognize her.
There you go.
Carry on.
It's about a TV reporter who finds himself in the middle of an Arab leader buying 2 portable nukes, terrorists, arms dealers, reporter, CIA spies killed, U.S. president ordering killed, like a lot of pandemonium. This is a full-on satire that oddly had some, timeless qualities about it.
True. Life became as strange as fiction.
Yeah. It's Sean Connery's here in it's a comedic role. He's not like trying to be wacky. He's not trying to outdo any other kind of comedic performer. He's playing the role.
It's a roguish anti-hero kind of role.
Right. Yeah.
It's strange because the film it's set, I think, in the near future. I don't think it's set like right at the exact second, although the issues are supposed to resonate accordingly.
Right.
But one thing I found interesting, the extent that he has basically a locked elbows relationship with the highest levels of American governmental power.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically in the Situation Room during several major scenes.
Right. Yeah.
And he's a TV news guy. He's sort of the Sean Hannity of his day, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean, the film, which was intended as satire at the time, is basically, it wanted to be sort of the Doctor Strangelove of modern
that's
Middle
accurate.
Eastern American relations. Back when the Cold War was sort of entering its third lap.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's a very prescient movie in that it climaxes with attempted terrorist attacks being staged, basically, as a pretext to go to war with the Middle East. And the film comes right out and says it. That, it's basically the implication is that the CIA, acting with or without the knowledge of the president, does all of the bad stuff that we see in the film.
Well, and they also try to bomb the Twin Towers as part of that,
yes,
too.
That is the staged terrorist attack that doesn't quite happen. That is then used as a pretext to go to war with the Middle East. And and it's a deeply angry, cynical, pessimistic film
Mm-hmm.
filled with, frankly, shocking violence.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's gore drenched, but there's quite a bit of
Oh, there's a scene with the guy set on fire that's
yes,
impressively done.
and
it looks really well.
there are
but,
suicide bombers out the wazoo.
Yep.
It's a fascinating picture.
Yeah, it's really something to dig up and like just take a look at because it's long
partially
forgotten.
because it's, not that this is nostalgia talking, but it's fascinating to watch a movie like this that could be like this and basically have not only be relatively non-controversial, but have no impact on the pop culture at large.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this is. I mean, Doctor Strangelove is definitely what they want to be, but it's one of its issues is it's by design, but also a fault of it is it's far too bloated. It's
a long picture.
So many allegiances, alliances, and people. There are some nice twists and turns that happen in there when you realize the government's dealing with its own government on something. But there's just a lot going on. It could have probably started at a later point in the movie to open. But it's a beast of a thing.
The film starts on an angle where, violence is at an all-time high. People are basically lashing out in various ways, including legal ways. They have they introduced this concept of like paid simulations where you can like simulate killing somebody that like there's this young girl played by Jason Lee who fantasizes about killing her parents. So she goes to a service that lets her act out that fantasy. And that could have been a movie right there.
Right.
But it's sort of this random introductory idea that
nothing ever happens.
Nothing ever happens with it, which is fine as contextual seasoning, but it means the movie takes a little bit longer to actually get to where it's going. But no, it's a curiosity. It's in that period between, frankly, between Diamonds Are Forever and The Untouchables, where even if the movies were good, and often they were, Sean Connery was not a box office draw.
He was getting ready to be James Bond again the very next year.
Yeah. Shit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason he did Highlander 2, not just Highlander.
Yeah.
And he's very good in this. It's an old school star vehicle. If they were to remake it, they never would. But if they were to remake it, John Hamm would probably play that role.
Right.
But
they also they touch. They have the president of the United States in this has a black female vice president. And they are ruthless. Like they are, because she's basically for show for him, and she plays against herself. Like I love her introduction had a great line where she has the hardest time just getting in to be in a meeting. She makes the comment like there's a lot of white tape you have to get through down here, and I was like, oh. And then her warnings about him putting himself in danger is all about I would be in command.
Yeah,
and to scare him to not do things. And that's really good satire right there. Yeah. It's,
she has a great line when, the president might basically offer himself up for arrest. With like, if you do that, there's going to be a black woman in the White House and she won't be serving dinner, assuming I don't get shot before taking over.
Yeah. She's probably one of my favorite points of the movie. It was really just
the funny thing is they're actually ribbing each other. They're actually on weirdly friendly terms. It's not an antagonistic line.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of shocking that A, this movie exists in the form that it does. B, that so much of it, unfortunately, I don't want to get, truther here or, loose. I don't want to join the loose change brigade, but there are certainly stuff in this film that plays under certain theories about, the Bush administration pre and post 9/11.
Right. Perhaps some loose changer accidentally caught this on some
perhaps
cable station was like, you know what?
Yeah.
And that's where it started here.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is, again, that a movie like this could exist as just a movie without making much of an impact for good or ill, without making much of a ruckus for good or ill. Yeah, it's the classic example of, The book isn't great, but I do love the line in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Strikes Back, where Lex Luthor says something based to the effect of freedom of speech is a wonderful thing, especially when no one's listening.
Right.
You can make a film as politically incisive and angry and anti-authority or whatever, if no one's going to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the cast was really fun as well, which I mean, to me it's like, oh, look at all these people in it, but at this time they weren't all these people in it. Like I get excited when I see John Saxon and things, Dean Stockwell, there's a Leslie Nielsen pre-Police Squad,
but post-Airplane,
yeah, pre-Police Squad,
was it the same year as Creepshow? He was on a run.
Yeah, I think Creepshow comes out does come out this year. Yeah, and just so many people, like Henry Silva, not in some schlocky, Italian mobster movie.
Well, instead he's playing a Middle Eastern warlord.
Right. Yeah.
That probably wouldn't fly today, because the rest of the film would totally fly today.
Yeah. No, and I think if you're into like political satire stuff, that and you'd be stunned that this is 40 years old and still has like the same problems and things going on. And there's other ideas in the movie that's the one thing, like I said, it's bloated. And Scott mentioned an interesting idea about killing somebody to not kill your parents and stuff, and that shouldn't even be in here, because it's like, well, that's interesting. Oh, it's gone. It was just a gag, and it has there's a more interesting exploration that could go with that.
And I think over the last 40 years, the media, as we know it, has devolved to such a point where the elements about the media in this film that are probably supposed to be satire don't register as much at all.
No, that's true. Like, it went to a place that they couldn't have imagined back then. That, it's very interesting. If you're looking for something Sean Connery, I'm pretty sure you probably haven't seen. Wrong is right. It's something to scratch that itch, that period that Scott said between Diamonds Are Forever and Untouchables. There's plenty of stuff to find of his that's going for things, not caring about things. It's an interesting time for Sean Connery. You have Zardoz, and then you have like Cuba. You have like, Outlander, and all sorts of odd choices for him that just whatever.
Fascinating picture. I think it's called The Offense. Let me look at it. Yeah, it's a very early Sidney Lumet picture. It's about a cop who basically loses control and kills a child molester in custody. I think you can rent it at the places where you could rent stuff. Again, it's very low budget, relatively small scale, but it's a fascinating time capsule, especially in terms of early Sidney Lumet.
Okay, yeah. It's a Scott recommendation here from summer of '82. But yeah, this was very unlike bad films we've had. Like this one, I'm like, you should check. You give this a shot. If you can find it, if it's not too hard to find, you don't have to go out of your way to find it. Like, it's for rental. Yeah, you can rent it for a couple bucks, and it probably will show up. It's a Warner Brothers movie, so it could wind up on HBO Max at any given moment.
To be fair, I should note that in the mid 70s, he was actually. There was some, Bird on the Orient Express, The Man Who Would Be King, Robin and Marion, The Great Trium Robbery. It really wasn't until the 80s when he started to.
But Robin and Marion wasn't like well regarded as it is now.
No, that's true.
That one's a
slow discovery.
Yeah, slow discovery. Man Who Would Be King's excellent though too.
Yeah, that's a terrific picture.
It's a very good film. He was kind of Nicolas Cage in there back in the day. Every so many you get this great one, and then he goes does schlock in a different era.
That's a terrific comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Because he wins the Oscar for The Untouchables, which was basically his comeback film. And then he starts doing star vehicles like The Presidio, supporting role in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, and then The Hunt for October. And then he goes through a period for about a little under 10 years where he is a star, an above the title star in stuff like Medicine Man and
Entrapment.
That was basically his last one, more or less. Entrapment. Of course, he retires after the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
He was about to go back in that again, and he's like, nope.
Finding Forrester is very good. That was sort of his last good movie.
Oh, the man now, dog. That was back when they would find some line that sounded like his Scotsman saying it sounded interesting, so they put it in the trailer. Because I think Extraordinary Gentleman was like, oh no, that's naughty.
He's like Gene Hackman, where if he had stopped one movie beforehand, he would have went out on a winner.
Right. You got that. The Michael Jordan playing on the Wizards. That's what they got there. That's what they got.
Billboard ranks them, AT40 counts them down.
All right. Well, heading over to what were the kids listening to music-wise, the Casey Kasem Top 40 Countdown. The top 10 from there. We got some movers and shakers this week. We have a new number 1. So Chariots of Fire did not last. Number 10, Did It in a Minute, Daryl Hall and John Oates. Number 9, The Other Woman by Ray Parker Jr. This is pre-Ghostbusters Ray Parker Jr. Number 8, Freeze Frame by the Jay Giles Band. 7, 65, Love Affair. That's always hard to read when I have a number and then a number. It's like number 7, 65, Love Affair by Paul Davis. Number 6, I've Never Been to Me by Charlene. Number 5, 867-5309 Jenny by Tommy Two-Tone hangs tough in the top 10. Number 4, I Love Rock and Roll, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Number 3, Don't Talk to Strangers, Rick Springfield is moving up, and it's not Jesse's Girl. Number 2, Vangelis has slid down with Chariots of Fire. And the new number 1, Ebony and Ivory by Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, which was toward the top. I think it was number 3 in the top 10 last week. It's moved down. Those are your Casey Kasem top 40s. But yeah, looking there. Those are probably going to stay similar. And by the end of this, probably be completely different. It'll look the same, but like the box office, it'll probably be a completely different story. Well, it will be a completely different story by the end. I would be stunned if any of these remained in the top 10 throughout the way. But it was nice having the Evangelist at top the number 1 for 1 week.
Warrior, thief, conqueror, king, Conan.
Let us take the world by the throat and make it give us what we desire.
Conan the Barbarian. Rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
And let's go to our marquee picture this week. And we're talking about Conan the Barbarian. Directed by John Milius, written by him and Oliver Stone, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, Sandahl Bergman, and Max von Sydow. As a young boy, Conan becomes a slave after his parents are killed and tribe destroyed by a savage warlord and sorcerer, Thulsa Doom. When he grows up, he becomes a fearless, invincible fighter. Set free, he plots revenge against Thulsa Doom. Here we are, Conan the Barbarian. This is what we would think of as a summer movie.
Absolutely.
Unlike Paradise.
This was probably the unofficial kickoff to the summer 1982 season. It opened number 1 at the box office with a $9.6 million, which if you give me 30 seconds, I can give you the inflation on that. Should have done it ahead of time. I apologize.
Was this a surprise as big of a hit as it was?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it was, by the way, adjusted for inflation, that's about 29.2. Because I mean, it was a hit. Don't get me wrong. But $38 million is decent without being spectacular.
Yeah.
Even adjusted for inflation, that's only $119 million.
Gotcha.
Now I don't, because the film only, again, it did $38 million on a $20 million budget. The only reason it was as big as it was is that overseas it did very well. I know Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of the first stars of that era to make a real effort to sell his films outside of North America.
Right.
He was somewhat ahead of his time in terms of pressing the flesh in Japan and Germany and France and whatever. And this was a genuine, overseas smash hit. It did about $80 million worldwide, so it quadrupled its budget. I don't think it was a surprise hit. Just maybe it did a little bit better than was expected, but it was certainly a movie like this on this scale with this level of sheen and prestige was an event film unto itself in 1992.
Yeah, and people knew who Arnold Schwarzenegger was before this movie. This wasn't like
it certainly was gimmick casting.
Yeah,
the idea is that giant bodybuilder with the pardon the funny accent playing a walking murder machine in playing Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah,
and it was very much star plus character hook. Think Angelina Jolie as Maleficent,
right?
Or back then it was probably closer to Angelina Jolie as Laura Croft.
Yeah. But that's when you take like what an established star, put it in there. This was kind of like, well, we can get him, like,
Dolph Lundgren as the Punisher.
Right. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Probably the equivalent of that. I said, because I watched the trailer for the movie and it was still very much exploitation like. It was like, go dad. There you go. He's gonna chop my head off. Watch it. And I'm like, wow, for his like, as much as we remember this picture as being this big blockbuster tentpole thing, the trailer is sure like, come enjoy some trash this weekend at the theater. Arnold.
Whatever gets him in the door.
Yeah, it worked. And this is one of the most influential movies to knock off cinema in the 1980s. Like this,
it's up there.
Kicks down to, I will not call the Beastmaster, which we'll be covering later in the summer, is not it's not a knockoff like you would think it's a knockoff, but it was being filmed before Conan.
Yeah.
And already in the works. So there's just two things happening, like as does with cinema. I mean, we had 2 Joan of Arc movies in a year, the Deep Impact and Armageddon year. But there was a lot, like Italian cinema would go nuts off of this movie, off of a movie we're talking about next week, and John Carpenter's Escape from New York from the year before. Those would be they would churn out ripoffs of those like crazy, like crazy with these. And so would Corman here with Conan. He would jump on it as well.
The film got mixed. I mean, the very definition of mixed reviews. Where it was a weird situation where some of the very things that were, this is why this film is good and we're seeing, somebody else would say this is why this film is terrible and not worth seeing. It's obviously very violent. It has R-rated gore, R-rated violence. It certainly is not going to win any feminism in film awards. And for that matter, whether intentional or not, it does play into certain Nietzschean Superman fantasies where you have a guy that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, very flamboyantly beheading James Earl Jones and throwing his head down a staircase.
Yeah. But he is the barbarian. He's sure to act like a barbarian.
And again, it's one of those things where, on one hand, it's a little Lenny Riefenstahl-ish, I'm sure. But, as someone that likes James Earl Jones, I want him to play villains like that.
Yeah.
I think we lose when we don't have non-white guy actors as villains just because we're scared of certain receptions.
Right.
But whatever. The film, was what it was. It was relatively popular. It certainly is more mainstream than any other Conan adaptation that we've gotten since then.
Right.
And frankly, I think it started a weird trend where Hollywood would see a film that was successful partially because Arnold Schwarzenegger was in it and think, hey, this is a franchise.
Right.
Conan, Predator, The Terminator.
Well, they also thought the next time we need to get the kids in the seats too. So they drastically which I think Conan the Destroyer is like a doofy.
Yeah, it's fun.
The B movie film you thought the last one might be, and it's silly.
I think it's actually a little better because the pacing's a little bit spiffier.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more colorful film, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
It's still violent. People still bleed when they get stabbed.
Right.
That was back when PG, this was before the PG-13. So Conan the Destroyer bringing PG did not mean that they fight each other with flowers and they have sweat instead of blood.
Right.
So I do think that, again, it's a situation where, one company or another has been threatening to do King Conan for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to reboot it with a then relatively unknown Jason Momoa in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
A film that I think is fine in its
Right.
own way. I think in some ways it's as good as this one, if not better. Again, it's quicker on its feet. There's more action. It's a larger scale. It's a $90 million picture.
Mm-hmm.
It also was financial suicide.
Yeah.
It's again, it's a situation where it's a property that just because people have heard of it doesn't mean they actually want a movie of it.
Well, it's a 1930s property too.
Yeah.
Like it comes from there. Like and then it had some comic books in the 70s. It had some magazine stories over the year. Like it's an old character. Even in this, like when they're doing it now, it's like 50 some years old.
And it's I think Netflix is doing another TV show of Conan. Whatever, it's Netflix. They're not accountable to anybody.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, all this, we should make a new Conan movie. It's like at the height of its popularity, where a movie like this was an event, when movies of this nature were rare, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was this incredibly interesting new star, the film still made, adjusted for inflation, $119 million.
Right.
Now you tell me you're going to spend $80 million on a movie that made 119 domestic 40 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the thing. Well, what they learned and what they figure it out in the 80s and what leads through the 90s, that it wasn't the property that was the franchise. It was the action star that was the franchise. Like Arnold, Sylvester Stallone, Van Damme, Seagal, like that was Lundgren to a degree. Like they'd find Jackie Chan. He was a franchise himself. Like all these people, that it was the guy.
Movie stars were the franchises.
Yeah.
And even when you had an IP in the mix, something like The Fugitive wasn't an IP necessarily. I mean, it was, and yes, people had heard of the show, but it was also just a very primal look.
Mm-hmm.
Respected doctor, played by Harrison Ford, America's good guy, wrongfully convicted of killing his wife, breaks out of jail by mistake, and has to track down the murderer.
Well,
that's terrific, even if you don't give a damn about the TV show.
Film version of your TV show. That was what an IP would happen.
Yeah.
And then you'd have like that. What the Flintstones would get that. The Brady Bunch would get some parody movies. Like it would be and now we've reversed where that always happened though. Like movies would become TV shows. Like I mean, Breaking Away had a series. League of Their Own failed at a series. Like,
did they ever make a Buffy TV show? I heard that was in development at some point.
I heard something about the guy who made it.
Yeah.
It was.
I liked his Justice League movie, but I don't know that much else about him.
Yeah. Oh boy. And we're talking about this in May when this is all happening in January this year.
And obviously MASH.
Yeah.
But jokes about Joss Whedon aside, Buffy is probably one of the more prominent examples of a movie that just didn't really make an impact, spawning a TV show that absolutely took on a life of its own.
Right. True.
Even Parenthood was a hit movie.
Yeah.
And obviously MASH was an Oscar-winning picture.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a little odd, other than maybe Police Squad.
Yeah.
You took a show that nobody watched and made it to a movie that people actually showed up for.
Right. Maybe Conan will do something. I watching this, like this movie still has like really great set pieces and special effects that still feel like movie magic. Like, I'm like, oh, how did that happen? And like just gigantic, that tower at the end. There's Indiana Jones type stuff in this where he's searching through caverns that work. It's like a tangible world without feeling like super fantasy. But it works still. Like I think like visually and effects wise, like I think how genders are played in movies nowadays not going to hold up for people too much, but I think as a tentpole type looking film, it still holds strong. And I'm gonna get shit for this, but I thought watching it this, I'm like, Sandal Bergman's Valeria is way cooler than Conan. Sorry, like she looks cooler in a fight. She's pretty small. She's pretty. I mean, she's pretty tough-willed. She gets to be this cool like godlike thing towards the end. Like I was like, yeah, she's pretty. Then she got like a movie called She or something a couple years later that was basically like, okay, people liked you in this, let's put you here.
And of course, after Ugo, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a series called Deathstalker from Corman, when the same thing happened with Lana Clarkson. She was much cooler than Deathstalker, and then they ended up making Barbarian Queen series of movies with her as the star. The woman who was murdered by Phil Spector, Lana Clarkson, but she was the Sandal Bergman character basically in Deathstalker, and she got her own spinoff as well. So, but
and then of course, after Conan the Barbarian, you had Red Sonja, which something that is almost seems unreal now, but you had Arnold Schwarzenegger in a supporting role in a female-centric sword and sorcery picture.
No, he's supposed to be Conan, and then they ripped it from him. But
why? Do you know why?
I have no idea. I don't. Maybe the studios were different, and they couldn't really do that. But he was supposed to be Conan.
I mean, he is Conan.
Yeah, he's totally 100% Conan in that movie. But
I'm not going to say that movie's good, but it's interesting.
Yeah, that's another property they think they can keep bringing back. Like nobody was there at the beginning in the first place. Like
nobody showed up under the best of circumstances. Yeah, it's the same thing with they want to reboot. The Green Hornet or The Saint. These films that didn't do, whether you like them or not, they did not do well during times when people actually showed up.
Yeah. I mean, like there's IPs that just. When I lived in Los Angeles, I was working with somebody on a screenplay once, and what was really cool, that Nintendo game Deja Vu, like it's a noir type thing, and just shits and giggles. Found the company that made it, sent an email off like thinking about writing a script, and they wanted to really talk about doing it because you know what? Sure, like
money.
Some IPs will just go for it because look, it's exposure and maybe make a buck off of it. So not everything's can be brought like that, but
I mean, Conan the Barbarian, it opened with a 9.5 million, legged out to 39 and change.
Was this, until Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, you think this was the biggest, most cherished, respected fantasy film there was?
No, because Excalibur was the previous year.
There's Excalibur. Okay, so I would say Excalibur myself, but that's a bit weird and more, I would think, more divisive of a movie. I'm thinking like general public.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay,
give or take. I mean, I mean, certainly, Excalibur made about 35 million the previous year domestic. I don't know if there's,
because I think Excalibur's awesome, but it's also way longer of a movie, and it's kind of. I could see people not caring for it.
Yeah,
but
I would say so, just because you get people that wouldn't otherwise be interested in the sword and sorcery genre that just want to, hey, it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger playing a giant barbarian, killing people with swords.
Right. But that's a long gap for quality.
Just as the appeal of Predator once upon a time was Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, and Jesse Ventura, and a bunch of other tough guys getting their asses kicked by an alien in the jungle.
Tough guy Shane Black.
Yeah. And it's again, the character of Predator was never the appeal.
Right.
It was never the draw.
True.
And there's a reason why, in franchises like that or RoboCop, that the first one was really the only one that was a hit.
And
the only exception to that was when you got James Cameron involved in your sequel.
Yeah.
Then you got Rambo First Blood Part 2, Aliens, and Terminator 2.
True. True.
But anyway.
Yeah. Sometimes as we grow older and we realize that we lost, Scott, we talk about this all the time. I'm more interested in like maybe just comic book and novel spinoffs was the way to go. Maybe. Because no one's going to read. Some people read them all, and there you go. And they have no budget. But yeah, so that Conan the Barbarian. Also want to note, good score. Has a really cool score to it. Big score.
You heard it in a lot of trailers in the 90s.
Yeah, for sure. And James Earl Jones, terrific baddie. Not much Max von Sydow, but he's there to give it a little heft later on in the film. So let's take that off. Now we got our number one film of that weekend. What was happening at the box office this weekend, Scott?
Conan the Barbarian was number one, earning $9.6 million in 1,395 theaters. Porky's was number two in its 9th weekend of release, dropping just 15 or 16% for a $2.8 million weekend and a $76 million total. Sword and the Sorcerer.
Porky's outdid Conan the Barbarian.
Porky's outdid a lot of stuff.
Yeah. This movie was humongous. It's so crazy.
As did, it's in 84, Police Academy.
Right.
Which outgrossed a lot of films that people talk about a lot more than Police Academy these days.
True.
For better or worse. And I'm not the first person to say this, but I think if Police Academy hadn't spawned a gazillion sequels of, well, lousy sequels, let's be honest.
Right.
I think it might be talked about alongside Porky's and Animal House and Stripes, Caddyshack. Not because it's particularly good, because it's not, but it is very much in that snobs versus slobs genre.
Right. Yeah. And there was a great article series years ago. Was it the Forgotten Number Ones that someone wrote? Forgotbusters. Yeah, that was it's a pretty good series.
I'm planning on doing one of those next month, I think, for Wild Hogs.
Oh, gosh.
Which turns 15 this next month. And if ever there's a film that represents the kind of film that once used to be a hit without breaking a sweat that now wouldn't even exist, it's freaking Wild Hogs.
There you
Terrible film, but it had a bunch of stars. It had an easy hook. It was just family friendly enough. And that was enough to get a $45 million opening weekend in early 2006. Early 2007.
Wow.
Anyway.
The number three, I think.
The Sorcerer was number 3 with 2.2 million. Paradise, remember Paradise, last week's winner, was 1.4 million in 4th place, 48% drop, which this was back in 1982. Sean Connery's Wrong is Right made 1.4 million in 5th place. It would eventually end up earning approximately $3.6 million.
Wow. So just a little more than doubled that.
Yeah. And then Chariots of Fire, Victor Victoria, If You Could See What I Hear, on Golden Pond, and now at 103.5, Death Trap, Richard Pryor Live on the Sunset Strip, and Quest for Fire.
Nice.
I haven't seen numbers this low since I was doing box office in late 2020, early 2021.
Yeah, but we're getting up there with the Conan, and
it's better now.
Yeah, it's better now. But yeah, let's see the box office report there. Seems like is Chariots of Fire and Victor Victoria. Those are like still hangovers from like an Oscar weekend, still playing pretty much. Those did pretty interesting. Cool. Well, that'll do it for this second weekend of May. Scott, as always, thank you for joining me. And before we sign out,
absolute pleasure.
Let people know where they can keep up with you.
Forbes.com. Please Google some variation of Scott Mendelson, Forbes, and the ticket booth. And I'm at Twitter at scottmendelson.com.
All right. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Brandon4KUHD. Scott and I will return next week, where Tom Skerritt gets his death wish, Humphrey Bogart posthumously stars in a movie with Steve Martin, and Mel Gibson takes a bit of a joyride. That and more as we continue on the 3rd weekend of the summer of 1982. Until then, stay film positive.
The summer of 82 at
40. Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. The Summer of 82 at 40 and News of the Moment themes by Press Maxon. Additional information on this and other episodes at thebrandonpetershow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail@thebrandonpetershow.com. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.